Welcome again to another episode of the Jay Walking Podcast. I'm your host, it's just Jay, and we're taking one step at a time, telling one story at a time. Before we get into this episode any further, I would like to just show my appreciation for those who are listening to the podcast or watching the video version on YouTube. I just want to say I appreciate you guys and thank you for allowing me to be in your space, and also thank you for listening, to my voice or just having me in the background. All the support, is appreciative. Today's episode is all about video games, and like I stated earlier in my, you know first few episodes, anime and video games have played such a huge, part of my life. And what I mean by that is, even during the COVID times, video games was a way to disconnect for me, disconnect from the real world, disconnect from all my problems and all the issues that was surrounding the world at the time. And even to this day is a great tool for me to just get away from, life itself. Because there's just some days where it just feels overwhelming, too much, and I'm just stressed out. And when those days come up or whenever I feel like that, game is one of the best things that I can do for myself. Now, I have a huge, repertoire when it comes to video games. I started out as a fighting game, person. I love the Mortal Kombat franchise, and Mortal Kombat itself, is a trend center when it comes to just fighting games in general. And even the recent, Mortal Kombat game, like I just love the new graphics, the new innovation when it comes to just interacting and just having moments with, not only like the opponent because they're fighting too and just fighting against you and you guys are going against each other one on one, but it's just even like going to like events where you seeing people are in a tournament just gaming and just the interaction, the crowd, and just everyone just so locked in of like what is happening and the emotions that is driving us to be invested into just the match. And that's what I love about Mortal Kombat and fighting games, because when I just go on Twitch or just YouTube, I just see people just like having fun, connecting, while also like being competitive in the gaming space, just so people can just enjoy themselves. Same thing with Call of Duty. Call of Duty has been around for as long as I can remember. I remember picking up, the Black Ops series, from GameStop. Black Ops 1 in particular, where they introduced Nuketown, such a game changer. And Call of Duty, have a special place in my heart because, along with the fighting games, Call of Duty has been one of those games where you just like reach to that max level prestige and do it again, and it gave me like a purpose to kind of work towards and just find myself over and over again just leveling up each and every time. And it was a way to disconnect from the world, because in the world obviously you're not going around like shooting the enemies or just respawning so to speak, but in Call of Duty, like, you was able to like take the frustrations you had during that day, and you're going to take it out on like the opponent or the team that you're going against in a domination or hard point, and also show like your intelligence of like how to manipulate certain spawns and just manipulate, the algorithm of like how you stand right here, this person's going to spawn over there, or like the space in between, like, where your, you know, gun is to the opponent. And it's just all a cool experience, because if you never played video games before, the hand-eye coordination, where it's like you are looking at a screen while moving your hands, we're not looking at it at the same time, and just looking around in the screen and just kind of trying to figure out where to go. Like, if you never played video games and done that before, like use your hands, look at something while moving simultaneously, it becomes difficult, and it's actually a skill develop, for us gamers through, again, games like Call of Duty or just fighting games like Mortal Kombat. That's like a tad bit of like the nerdy side when it comes to these things. But back to the purpose of like the gaming, hobby for me, it it became such a great tool to express my emotions. Meaning, like, there are some games that just bring out like the raw emotions that I have for myself. And I'm sure if you're a gamer, like there's a couple games that comes to mind, whether you're into Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, or even just like games like 2K where everything just feels like pressure and like on the line and you need to like be the best version of yourself so your team can win. But I want to go to the more story driven games because these games I'm about to name off literally like brought out so much emotion from me that I just had built up in my like soul pretty much to then just let it come out and let it be healthy and natural versus just simply disconnecting and just bottling everything in. Even though I said video game is a way to me disconnecting from the world itself. But the game I'm bringing up and I have in mind right now is recently been on my mentions and just been on my mind recently, and that is the Persona series, in particular Persona 5 Royal. Now, for those who don't know, Persona 5 Royal is a JRPG game from Atlas, and it has such great storytelling. I encourage anyone, if you're driven by, story and just wanting to be a part of, character growth and development, not just with your own character, but the cast and like other people around you, and you want to be invested in like where things go, I highly recommend the Persona series game. But I'm only particularly mentioning Persona 5 Royal because that was my introduction to the Persona series. Now, just to not give any spoilers about the game, but the game literally start off with you coming into a new area, the countryside of things. Actually, no, you are a country student, like a Japanese like student coming from the countryside, and you're going to the big city. And the reason why you went to the big city is because you defended a woman, you know, to not get, how can I put it without feeling like I should be, actually I want to be sensitive. So basically you're protecting a woman from any further, actions by a man who at the time you didn't know who he was. And I won't say like this, say who that character is for story purposes, but you're basically defending the woman and making sure nothing bad happens to her. This person pressed charges and just transit like transition you into like now like you're being charged with this crime, which was simply just defending this woman. You were charged with it, and now you're being shipped off to the big city because parents like created a settlement and be like, okay, this is what you need to do for a year, and you're on a year's probation. And throughout that whole year, you go through so many journeys. You go from, you know, the school is being harassed by, this PE teacher, particularly the Japanese volleyball team, the men and women, different treatment and different, relationships, of course. And again, I don't want to get in spoilers, but you're tasked at some point to have this PE teacher who was so corrupt and just a sadistic person and have him a change of heart. Now, in the game, it'll explain what change of heart is, but it's basically helping the person see a different perspective and just help them come to their senses and be like, okay, what I'm doing is wrong. And throughout this whole journey, even from the first, dungeon, because in Persona 5 series, you always go through a dungeon or a palace in this game in particular. You go through the person's inner world and thoughts, and their deep desires, and you help them see what's actually going on and help them see like, hey, what you're doing is not okay, and we need to change your heart. And you do this so often, so many times, but during those times, the story changes where you see these characters grow, you see these characters make mistakes, you see these characters develop actual friendships and just being able to rely and communicate, what their feeling are. And even during the arc where they was in disagreements and there was like a huge disconnect, I was so invested into the story because at that time, I was dealing with loneliness. I was dealing with like, relationship problems and just dealing with you know, friendships and just dealing with all sorts of things. And this game brought out like not only those topics and more, because I was so emotionally invested with this game and like what was happening and the story that was being told of how we are so chained to, societal norms and just like you need to be like this version, you need to be like that. And that's why I was feeling in the world at the time. Even to this day, there's times where I feel so much of what's happening around me and being chained by the fact like, hey, you need to be like this. You need to go with whatever is around you and that's what you should be. And this game literally taught me and showed me visually that you can break away from these chains and be who you are as a person, and to basically rip off the mask that you're portraying to the world. And once I got that thematic theme down and just like replayed the game again, every single moment was so much more impactful than the first time I played. The only difference is when I first played, the raw emotions happen, and towards the end of the game, I'm not gonna lie, I did cry in one of the moments where there was such a heartfelt moment of like all the characters feeling a sense of loss and grief, and a brief moment of like accomplishing what they needed to do. And I just bawled out crying because that's why I felt. Like I felt a sense of grief and loss of being authentic with myself and being authentic to the people around me. And it's just that story of itself helped me become like a version that I needed to be at that time and learn these lessons and being able to take it on, head on, which is life, and being able to adjust to that and just see that how visually the story played out as I was like watching, each character grow. It helped me in my personal life and being able to grow for myself. And again, I highly recommend that game because that game is such a beautiful masterpiece. And then it led me to Persona 3 Reloaded. Now, there's an original version, Persona 3, and there's another version called Persona 3 Fez. Persona 3 Reloaded is a mix of both of those put together. Now, there's arguments to be made of which is better than the other, but Reload was my introduction to that story. And the story revolves around life and living it to its fullest, because you may never know when it's the last moment of your life. And the game tells a beautiful story about how death shouldn't be feared. Death should be a reminder and a thing to have in mind that should fuel us to live and live with other people, whether it's in intimate relationships, friends, and family. Like life is going to happen with or without you, and death is all of our end. Death is something that plays out in everyone's lives, and it should be a reason to actually live and be present in the moment. And that game was such a beautiful game as well. Again, a Japanese student, not necessarily getting in trouble, but is an orphan and has to go to a different part of the city and attend to this school. But once you get into the game, you notice there's certain things at this school and just this town is not right. But again, to avoid spoilers, I don't want to get in too much in depth when it comes to the game, but the game express again, living life is the best you can do for yourself, and live it to the fullest, because death is always around the corner and death can happen, and that's just a part of life. And that helped me when it came to just not necessarily deaths in like either family or like through friends, but there's times where you grieve like the loss of like a former version of yourself or things that you love to do. Again, what I named at the beginning of this podcast, or even now, like video games has been a part of my life, but there's a part of me that is grieving because I can't play the game as long as I want to now. I can't stay up all night and play Call of Duty or 2K anymore. There's part of me that just wants to step away from it and just continue like this passion, like podcasting, or just watching TV and just spend more time with, loved ones. And part of me loves that. Like I want to continue to do what I always done and just entertain, interact with other people and make sure people laugh and smile, throughout the day. but there's also a part of me that's just miss being able to game 24/7, being able to use it as a way to cope with things that's happening in my life. But as I've grown and became mature, and games even such as the Persona series, like I haven't touched in so long because I've grown up in life, and gaming is being not the main source of disconnection. And a part of me feels sad about that because again, I use games as a emotional checkpoint for so long that now it's becoming, another coping skill, but it's not the main one anymore. And there's a part of me that feels saddened about it, of that death, so to speak. But again, through the lens and the perspective and the knowledge I got from Persona 3 Reloaded, again, a video game, it literally taught me how to deal with the death of old habits, the death of old coping skills that were great for me at the time, and now transitioning to a new part of my life, which is again the Jaywalking podcast, and only being able to play video games for, like, let's say for instance 4 hours. I'm okay with that because just like the game told me, you know, death is always around the corner and death will happen. And that should be a reminder to just live and just change and grow. And that's literally what I've been doing and what I'm expressing to you in this episode, that literally gaming got me through it in the past and is also getting me through it currently. And it's still ironic that, a game taught me how to deal with the death of using it as a coping skill. So I just thought that was interesting. So I just want to like kind of bring that up. And I will say that even if it's a healthy hobby and a way to escape, it also became a source of avoiding, things I needed to address in that moment. For instance, a small example, like I used the video games to like distract myself and avoid, doing certain schoolwork, whether it was in college or in high school. I was just using it as a way to be like, all right, I don't need to do this right now because I want to decompress and just kind of focus on this, and then I'll get to that later. Or I get into an argument with like, friends or family, and I use gaming as a way to avoid them and just not listen to them, even though I should have like either interacted with them or at least brought up something in a conversation to amend that relationship or keep it at, a respectable manner. And there is a difference between a healthy escape and avoidance, just like how I named it. I did use it to like, again, shut everyone out, but there's also a way to kind of use it as a, okay, I actually need to decompress from today and I need to actually like rest, man. And it's important to know the two distinctions because again, one could be used as like fuck you and fuck everybody else, while another one's like a genuine, hey, I need a space for myself to get back mentally. And there's times where it's hard to, find that balance. But one thing I always advise people, like if you use video games as a disconnection, take a minute to pause the game, or like once you finish like the online match, just stop what you're doing and just, if you have a partner that you live with or, you know, communicate with, do that. Because like I said in the beginning, like, life is something to be worth living. So just check on them and still have that connection with them. And then if you ever feel like, once that's done and you're able to like, see how they're doing, just check on them. Or you check on like family through call, or just seeing them in the living room, because if you live with your parents still, do that. Because, you know healthy coping skills that to get to disconnect can be used also again to just avoid everything, and that's not the greatest decision all the time. But that's just something I wanted to like introduce and just tell you guys. And also, like I said, Persona, series, and just those two games in particular, I just want to shout those out. But also just shout out to like all the fighting games. Shout out to like, The Last of Us. I played that. That was so great. And even shout out for those who like know me, heard me say this game before. But the Telltale, The Walking Dead, that game with Clementine, Lee, and just seeing Clementine's story is such a beautiful game. I love that game. And hopefully if I ever have a daughter, I want to name her Clementine. or at least nickname her Clementine or have that as her middle name. However you slice it, I'm gonna have a daughter with the name Clementine because that game had such a stronger connection with me of how, someone could be a mentor to someone who's like vulnerable and like not able to defend themselves, to then seeing the same person, Clementine, transitions to a woman into her own right and being able to stand up for herself and stand up for other people and to communicate and go through difficulties of this world that's being overrun with zombies. I just love that game. I love the story. I love the relationships in it, and shout out to it. I just wanted to bring that out and say that because those are the type of games that is so therapeutic and just so fascinating that it just changed, your point of view. But yeah, man, that's what I wanted to say in this podcast of how much video games has impacted me while also teaching me how to slowly give up that hobby and that coping skill. Because, sometimes hitting pause is how we survive in this world, but also sometimes hitting pause can bring us back to the world that we need to be present in and take a step in and being able to be with our loved ones. Thank you again for listening to this podcast. And thank you for taking this walk with me of talking about my passion and nerding out with video games. Because honestly, like I said, as time goes on, I'm like slowly moving away from playing video games as long as I used to. It's still beautiful to know the fact that I'll be okay without it. And I'll be okay with the limitations because this is my main focus right now. My relationships, whether it's like family, my partner, and coworkers, these relationships are all important to me. And it's okay because I hit pause on the video game and slowing down on it because I'm taking one step at a time and I'm telling you this story and many more, one podcast at the time. Thank you for listening and watching. I see you in the next episode. Deuces.